Brock's been really good wherever he's thrown most of his career. He's always been a little bit better throwing outside the numbers. Don't know why. This year, his quarterback rating over the middle is 50-something. And outside the numbers, it's like 130-something. What do you attribute that stark split?
Well, look at the numbers of bodies
Yeah.
between the numbers and through the hash marks as opposed to the number of defensive bodies outside the numbers. It's a much cleaner, clearer picture if you throw on rhythm and timing outside the numbers. When you have patterns called where you're throwing the ball inside on the square ends and other patterns that Kyle likes to throw over the years, whether it was Garoppolo or CJ Beathard or whatever, they got a lot of interceptions on those balls. You got a lot more traffic from the defense in the. It's like a jam-packed freeway throwing the ball into the middle of the field when you have all these defenders there. You got a free safety, you got linebackers, you got to throw through lanes of defensive linemen as well, where you're throwing outside the numbers. You have a much cleaner look as to where you're going. And the Niners have always, under Kyle, if you go back and studied all of the quarterbacks, you'd find out that they have a higher percentage of interceptions on throws going in the middle of the field on the square end patterns and things like that than they do on anything going outside the numbers.
That's so interesting. Go ahead.
No, I was just Grant. A lot of it is that defensive coordinators also keep a scattershot chart of where all the balls are going, and when they start to see that you're throwing, especially by down and distance, the preponderance of balls are going into a certain area of the field. Well, hey, they're going to pack it in. We played Tampa Bay years ago, and in 92, 93, and they came into the game knowing that we pushed the ball down the field. They were banking on the fact that we were still going to push the ball down the field. After the game, the defensive coordinator came up to me and he goes, you guys really exhibited patience today. Instead of trying to push the ball into your favorite areas of the field, you guys backed off. And when we dropped deeper into the zones, we were pushing our linebackers to 15, 16 yards of depth. So we had less windows between the deep third and the backers. You threw all these underneath routes and you were getting run after the catch. Well, see, the same thing, though, with Kyle. He needs to look at his scatter shot chart and say, okay, where am I throwing all the balls? Where are the defenses playing? How deep are they dropping now to be able to flood the areas to where I like to call patterns, and then make an adjustment? Coaches have to adjust.
I like how you've identified this as more of a Kyle issue than a Brock Purdy issue, because Brock's had success throwing over the middle. And I feel like a lot of Kyle's quarterbacks have had success throwing over the middle, but as they play more and more, their interceptions go up and up, and most of the interceptions are over the middle. And it seems like maybe instead of this being quarterback error, as we've talked about, these quarterbacks are just kind of trying to execute what Kyle's telling them to do anyway. It seems like this might be more of a tendency thing. And he had that awful game against the Panthers where they had those 3 picks and 3 drives. Since then, they've only had 1 pick in 3 games. And I think Kyle's done a better job of like self-scouting and understanding that he needs to call plays to the outside. That's where most of those touchdown passes were in Indy.
Well, yeah, the bottom line is, sometimes you go to the well too often, and eventually people get a beat on you, and you can't always be an always and a never guy because you're in the crosshairs too much. And that is if Kyle is doing more of a, analytics and a self-scout of himself as a play caller and what he's doing at certain downs and distances, you have to make an effort. The great thing that we had at the Raiders, Johnny Otten would come up and say, okay, now on this situation, this parts of the field, you guys are starting to do this too much. Mm-hmm. And so he would come up and say, okay, hey, stay away from that play, stay away from this design, because the prevalence of it is getting so tendency, the opponents are going to get a feel for it. And so you have to make the adjustment. So you go and tell the quarterbacks, okay, hey, we can't call this play in this situation from this area of the field anymore. So it's off the table for this game.
I think it's interesting. One interception Purdy threw was at the end of this game late, and it was on a square in to Kendrick Bourne. And it was like, Yeah, Kendrick should have caught it, hit him in the hands. Yeah, Brock should have thrown a better pass. It was high. But like Kyle, you're up 14 points with about 4.5 minutes left. Did you need to call that dig right there, man? Because it's an inherently risky pattern.
It's true. See, what's it take? It's like, what's it take to win the ball game? You've
Right.
already got, a boatload of points. The game's over. Just,
Yeah. Don't give him new life. I mean, all you got to do is run the ball or throw it to the flat to your all-world fullback. He'll get you 6 yards. You don't have to force it over the middle of Kendrick Bourne. Anyway, that was my little rant. But I think it's interesting. It seems like we saw it against Carolina. Carolina was so ready to take away that dig over the middle. Like ever since then, I think Kyle's been a little bit smarter, much smarter about
well,
when and when
also,
not to call that pattern.
Grant, after a while, it becomes a little gun shy to call it because,
Yeah, good point.
it's having bad return on investment. So, like, okay, Kyle, talking to Kyle, I got to stay away from doing this because it's having negative return on investment. It's not working. Get away from it. And
Well, it's
that's
interesting because like who are
reinforcing
you going to throw
itself.
it to? We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. You like throwing that play to a wide receiver who's lined up outside the numbers and then breaking, getting the ball just as he crosses the numbers, not when he's at the hash mark. So Jawan Jennings often in the slot. Kittle's a tight end. You need someone sort of on the edge to run that. And it's like, who do you want to throw it to? Kendrick Bourne? That didn't work. Demarcus Robinson? Ricky Pearsall. That's been an interception waiting to happen. I mean, I don't know.
The thing
No
about
offense to
this,
Ricky.
I don't know if the Niners, quote unquote, have that receiver
Yeah. Well, they
who
had it.
has the skill set and has the build and the knack and the feel for running that square in like it should be run.
Well,
At the Raiders,
Ayuk
we
was
had the
pretty good until his knee blew up.
yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that ship has
That's a
sailed.
that ship has sailed. They're gonna have to get that guy in the offseason.